On the way to Novi Oskol, the engineer company ran into a group of Hungarian soldiers who were part of the supply train of 23rd Light Division. They explained that their truck had broken down, that this caused them to lose contact with the rest of their unit, and how German soldiers threatened them and forced them to give up the now repaired vehicle. At least they could join the engineers and retreat together towards the same destination. They also encountered two officers who passed them with their horse-drawn sleigh. They had simply left their unit in the hands of a sergeant and had gone ahead to enjoy the comforts of a warm home, while their soldiers had to march in the cold. This was an example First Lieutenant Bartloy Sabo would not follow. After another short break, which was filled with friendly banter and laughter, thanks to Private Roca, who made some naughty comments on their situation and encouraged the others to sing, mainly because they looked like shit in the nasty weather, the company continued its march toward Novi Oskol, the first major city along the way. Before reaching it, they stopped briefly to fix their uniforms and to start marching in perfect order as if they were returning from an exercise. Their appearance surprised the locals and the other units, but those faces also revealed disillusion and hopelessness. In the city, they found the battalion HQ, which was fully motorized and was always ahead of them, and relatively comfortable houses for the night, and soon they received good news as well. First, the platoon under 3rd Lieutenant Rule that had been left behind in Budyonny arrived in good order, exhausted but without any losses. This unit joined other retreating troops after exchanging fire with the advancing Soviet forces. Any serious defensive action was out of the question, as they were seriously outgunned. Then two other sleighs arrived with all the officers' personal items and equipment after days of wandering. They had lost contact with the unit back in Alexeyevka during the breakthrough, but finally found their way and rejoined them. Their horses were barely standing, but all the items were recovered, except for 3 bottles of French champagne that were frozen and no longer enjoyable. The following morning, Major Gombosch from Battalion HQ gave them new orders. According to his situation report, there was no cohesive line, Budyonny was lost, so the retreat had to continue towards Korocha, another 65 kilometers to the west, while Hungarian units under Kramer Corps tried to slow down the Soviet advance. Reinforcements could not be expected due to the situation at Stalingrad, but partisan activity was intensifying. The company was low on ammunition, 20 to 30 bullets, and 2 to 3 hand grenades per soldier, along with fodder for the horses, while those who suffered from frostbite could not be handed over to the overwhelmed medical units. However, the men were eager to move away from the danger zone, not suspecting that the most difficult part was yet to come. On the 24th of January, the company left Novi Oskol to first reach Mihailovka, then Korocha, the next major city. Marching was more difficult now due to frostbite, but they could not sit on the sleighs either, as they would have frozen to death. So far it had been 7 days and 170 kilometers, but they had marched only on 3 days, so the daily average was above 40 kilometers. Several times they had to push the other vehicles that got stuck or wait for a motorized column to pass. Even without combat, the men were exhausted. On the way to Korocha, Lance Corporal Sabo from 1st Platoon climbed onto a German truck and left his squad behind. When they caught up to him several hours later, he was reprimanded by the 1st Lieutenant, receiving the most severe punishment. His arms were tied behind his back and fixed to a nearby fence outside in the cold. After about 5 minutes, he was released and he apologized, trying to hold back his tears. For the remainder of the retreat, he behaved impeccably, realizing that his previous actions were detrimental to morale and unit cohesion. and that abandoning his unit went against everything that he as a soldier was supposed to do. First Lieutenant Bartfai Sabo could have been harsher, as all officers had orders to shoot anyone who tried to flee. At Korocha, from the 25th of January, new defensive positions were being established under German command. The 151st Engineer Battalion's HQ was also there, still under 23rd Light Division, which remained subordinated to Kramer Corps and played its role as the rear guard, covering the retreat of all other units. The company could finally rest a few days, treat the wounded, get more provisions, and wait for new orders. Hungarian Second Army's HQ was now withdrawn from frontline duties, focusing on the reorganization of troop remnants, while on the 29th of January, Novi Oskol fell, and the defending German and Hungarian units also retreated towards Korocha. On the 1st of February, explosions could be heard in the distance, more vehicles arrived from the east and the north, while Korocha itself was being evacuated. On the 3rd of February, they heard a German radio broadcast about the capitulation of 6th Army at Stalingrad, which was a huge blow. 2 days later, the advancing Soviet troops were merely 10 kilometers from Korocha, so the engineers received new orders. The 107th Company, together with the 102nd, would join the defending units and prepare the only bridge to the east for destruction, even though on both sides of that bridge the ground was frozen, so Soviet tanks could easily bypass it. On the 6th of February, after a few hours of sleep, orders arrived to keep only the absolutely necessary equipment in the city and prepare for combat at the road to the east under a German regiment that badly needed reinforcements. Those that could no longer move due to wounds or frostbite should be sent with the supply train to Annovka, another 30 kilometers to the west. Even though none of them stepped forward to leave the unit in this dire moment, First Lieutenant Bartfai Sabo ordered around 30 men to leave, while the rest, around 190 soldiers, moved out to a group of houses called Vechtievka at the eastern edge of Korocha to join a German group under First Lieutenant Jordan. He initially ordered the Hungarians to divide their company into platoons and subordinate each platoon to a different German unit, but after some arguing, he relented and placed the entire company in reserve in case of a Soviet attack. First Lieutenant Bartfai Sabo thus managed to keep his company intact, but when he asked about possible routes for the eventual retreat, his German counterpart proudly announced that they would stay and defend the area. We shall see how they would go about this. By 9 a.m., orders came from First Lieutenant Jordan to attack the Soviet troops in the nearby valley, just opposite the German defensive positions. The engineers would advance on the left flank, while 2 Hungarian light tanks would launch a frontal attack as a diversion, hopefully forcing the Soviet troops to retreat. A plan was hastily drawn up, according to which one platoon under Lieutenant Lukács would be on the left, another platoon under 3rd Lieutenant Ruhl would be on the right, while 1st Lieutenant Bartfai Sabo remained in the center with 2 machine guns. It took them 30 minutes to cover the 600-meter distance in the knee-deep snow, but when they stormed the Soviet unit, complete surprise was achieved, as they had not anticipated an attack from that area in the deep snow. Without suffering any casualties, they forced the enemy to give up the valley, but they would not follow the retreating Soviets into the nearby woods, as this was very risky. The light tanks quickly returned to the city, captured weapons were collected, and they were soon back in the village, pleased about the successful and very lucky outcome, but worried about the diminishing reserves. They each had only 4 to 5 bullets and 1 to 2 hand grenades left. The Germans refused to resupply them, while the Hungarian Engineer Battalion had no supplies at all. This was also the revenge of First Lieutenant Jordan. If the Hungarians would not place their platoons under German leadership, They should not ask for supplies, they should just rely on their own superiors. In the next episode, we'll see how this relationship deteriorated even further.